Wake up, Cyberpunks. We've got some Cyberpunk 2077 material here for you. CD Project Red executive with GameIndustry.biz. Because I thought there was actually some really interesting insights into the trouble behind Cyberpunk 2077's launch, as well as some really like Olympic levels of cope. And I'm actually quite excited to share these with you. So we'll kind of just go through the pertinent parts of this interview here. So this is an interview with a gentleman, an executive that works at CD Projekt Red, which, for those unfamiliar, is a Polish game developer. Michael Płatkowski, I believe, is his name. I absolutely butchered the pronunciation of that, and I apologize, especially to my Polish viewers, who had an interview with Games Industry during Summer Games Fest last week. So he starts the interview like this, quote, we're in a cool moment right now. Yes, the road was bumpy when everything was awesome and amazing before the release of Cyberpunk. It was the time of my life, but it was too good to be true. The game was shaping up to be amazing and we were all super hyped, but this hype surrounding us was a big pressure. Then there was the release and it was not a fairy tale anymore. We knew that we had to work hard to come back. It was a tough moment for everyone. We had to rebuild a lot of things inside of the company. We started with pipelines on the dev side. We started to think, should we tie our future with a different engine or should we stay with our own? We made some decisions about how we work, how we are structured. It was a big rebuilding. At the same time as this, we knew we wanted to work on Cyberpunk and make not just a great expansion, but also improve a lot of things in the base game. It was quite a journey, but right now I'm just excited to see what people will say when they start playing. So that's a nice bit of like marketing speak from a guy who, you know, at the end of the day, like this guy, yeah, he's the vice president of PR and communication. Okay, so this picture we see here, you know, he's employed to be the hype man for the company. So I'm gonna, you know, I'm not gonna, Michael, I'm not gonna give him a lot of shit here. It's literally his job to big the game up. But you know, let's scroll a bit further down as he kind of. They go into his background here. So Płatkowski has been at CD Projekt for 12 years, joining back when it was 120 people and he was part of a marketing team of 6. Now the business is around 1,200 employees and his team is close to 100. And for him, the real disappointment around Cyberpunk is that it let down the studio's core fans. Quote, I was personally not happy with how things turned out. I was not expecting that. I knew immediately that we had to come back. I liked the spot we were in. I'm not talking about the peak of hype, but 2 years before that, we had our community. We liked them, they liked us. It was awesome to work at CD Projekt Red. Yeah, I'm just going to interject here. So I was very much a fan of the Witcher games, as I think a lot of other people were. I personally think that The Witcher 3 is one of the best RPGs I've ever played. And when I saw that CD Projekt Red were working on a Cyberpunk game of all things, I was incredibly excited. I was super hyped for this game, as I think a lot of people were. Because in my mind, they were great devs. They had a history of delivering a really big ticket, like high budget, high profile RPG. We had a great base game, The Witcher 3. Then we had 2 amazing expansions in the forms of Heart of Stone and Blood and Wine. And really, it just seemed like the devs were on a roll. So for CD Projekt Red to release Cyberpunk in the way that they did was actually really quite a kick in the gut for me personally, and I imagine it was for a lot of other fans. We'll return to Michael here. So after the release, it was tough, but I knew that we had the same people. The game is the same. We just need to fix our relationship. The only thing we could truly do is deliver what we are capable of. I have a feeling that soon we'll be able to do just that, and hopefully that will be a new beginning for everyone. Yeah, I think what CD Projekt Red encountered is it's kind of similar to there's an element in big business known as the trust thermocline. I think that's what it's called, is the trust thermocline. And it's the idea that when you have fans of a product or fans or loyal customers of a certain company, the amount of trust that they invest in that company is a lot like a large body of ice and water, right? So you have this huge iceberg, and when it comes to melt, it melts very slowly. Companies, when they have that kind of dedicated fan base, they it's really quite slow to lose that level of trust with the people who really came to enjoy the work that you're putting out and the products. But what happens is, as you rapidly approach that point of zero, you start to lose that trust very quickly. It's almost like, if you picture a graph, it's almost like a curve. And I think that's very much what happened with CD Projekt Red. They, if you look back at some of the marketing hype for Cyberpunk, they were promising the world to us. It was going to be like an RPG. It was going to almost be like a Cyberpunk life sim. V was going to be able to do all these crazy things. There was going to be all this like reactivity in the story, all these different paths, all these different role-playing elements. And looking back, there's no way. Like, a team twice their size would have struggled to have delivered everything they said they were going to deliver. I think that they were kind of victims of their own success and also overpromising. And yeah, so personally, it's going to be, in my mind, it's going to be really hard for CD Projekt Red to kind of rebuild that trust. Kind of the general understanding of the trust that McLean, at least for other companies, is once you lose that trust, you don't get it back. It's just gone. The gaming industry is a little more resilient than that, in that sometimes developers and publishers are seen to regain some of that lost goodwill. Probably the best example I can think of is Capcom have been on a pretty good spree lately in terms of releases, at least in the West. We've had some absolutely banging Capcom games recently, and they've really, like, I'm one of many people who sat here just kind of waiting for them to fuck something up, which they have to a certain extent with, in my opinion, Street Fighter World Tour, but that's something else entirely. So we'll just continue with the article here. It wasn't just a game that needed fixing. CD Projekt had grown rapidly, and managing the teams was proving challenging. The company had become known for crunch culture. There it is, crunch culture. There was a need to change how it operated, and that was clear to everyone during the development of Cyberpunk 2077. Quote, "It's really hard to change a company when you have to deliver something and you have a deadline." Yeah, I bet when they were developing Cyberpunk, it was all hands on deck to get something they could ship. Quote, "It's not the best moment for that. Everyone was waiting for the release. These changes would have happened anyway, but the Cyberpunk situation was another motivation. It was a wake-up call to say, let's rebuild, let's restructure, let's rethink. What can we learn from this? It's not an easy fix. It's not like you can decide to do something differently starting tomorrow. It's a process that will probably take a lot of time. But I can see that the company works a different way than it used to, and no one wants to repeat the mistakes that were made." I mean, for a PR guy, actually, this is quite a reasonable statement to make, in my opinion. When you have an organization of that size, fostering cultural changes in how that company operates is way easier said than done. So I kind of wish him and the other guys at CD Projekt Red all the best at that, assuming that what he's saying is true and it's not just marketing speak for plugging this new Cyberpunk title we've got coming out in the form of Phantom Liberty. Quote, "Cyberpunk took us a lot of time to deliver, and we grew. We needed to rethink how we were working in bigger groups and make sure that everyone listens to each other, and also make sure we empower teams to work on their fragments of the game, but when you combine everything together, it runs smoothly from all sides. We need to empower new leadership. We want to decentralize how we are working. The biggest thing was standing up and saying, we have to do it. Yes, we were expecting a different launch for Cyberpunk, but now we have another chance in front of us. For me, as the person responsible for communication, I want to rebuild the connection with gamers because we had people following us for years and they were disappointed." That includes me, side note. That, for me, is the biggest thing. We have to make the game for them. Vlatko Golevsky says that there's now an entire team dedicated to improving life within the studio, and that includes putting an end to excessive working. See, if that's true, I wholeheartedly welcome that. In my personal opinion, crunch culture is one of the most toxic and corrosive elements within the gaming industry as a whole. And unfortunately is becoming more of a thing as games budgets and dev cycles lengthen. So anything that improves the working conditions for the people at CD Projekt Red, in my opinion, won't just be good for the workers, but should hopefully also foster a much healthier and a much better game as a result. Quote, so there are a group of people responsible only for transformation. They are not responsible for the quality of what we are delivering, but what's going on in the studio, including creating new spaces so it's way more comfortable to work. The whole COVID situation hit us as well, and we had to figure out how to work with people at home. On the one hand, we are missing our colleagues because we don't see them so often. But on the other hand, we learned how to work with digital tools to make sure that everyone knows everything. All this mess started when we were still making Cyberpunk, but now we have the time to work on these tools to develop them, to create best practices. It's an interesting time. So I get now that the global pandemic starting the way it did it seems like a long time ago. You know, we're coming up on 3 years now is when it first started. If you think of the number of issues that Cyberpunk 2077 had when it released, you can't, in my mind, I'm not entirely convinced that the pandemic was the sole cause of those. If you have that much left to fix, that late in the development cycle, when the pandemic started, something's very wrong. And I think to a certain extent, this is a certain... I don't want to call it an excuse because I think that's unfair, but it doesn't equate for the whole picture in my... Yeah, so Blood and Wine came out in 2016. So if we're being charitable and we're saying that they maybe started full-time development of Cyberpunk after Blood and Wine came out, Cyberpunk had already been in development for 4 years when the pandemic happened. Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced. Obviously, it would have had an effect, but for the game to be as fundamentally unfinished and feature incomplete and broken as it was, I'm not convinced, personally. That's just my personal opinion, though. Okay, this is all just more spiel for Phantom Liberty. Oh, this is a little damning. Platko Golubsky insists CD Projekt Red is changing and has learned lessons, but there are understandable concerns about whether the company is still stretching itself too much. Alongside Cyberpunk 2077 and the various licensed spin-offs, including comics, comic books, and Netflix shows, CD Projekt has announced a huge slate of games, including a new IP, 3 Witcher games, and a Cyberpunk sequel. So we go back to him, quote, first of all these projects are at different stages, he defends. It's not that we are doing all that in the same moment at the same stage, because there would be a lot of work. Yeah, you're telling me, mate. We're thinking about the strategy for years to come. We really care about our IPs. We want to develop them. We want to create games within them, but also we want to make sure we are focused all the time. We have a lot of discussions, like, what is most important right now? Where do we want to go? What do we want to achieve? The discussions we're having are really healthy. It's easier to spread the butter too thin. We were constantly checking and talking, and we think we know what to do. Almost 3... So this is the kind of the part of the article that stood out to me. Almost 3 years ago, CD Projekt achieved, in Platko Golubsky's words, quote, a critical mass of negativity. Yet the reaction from the team, he says, wasn't to despair, but to roll up its sleeve and get to fixing it. That process will always be ongoing, he adds, but that the launch of Phantom Liberty will hopefully be the first sign of a studio that's desperate to right those wrongs. Here's the incendiary quote. Here's the quote that I think I might get a little clickbaity with. Quote, I actually believe Cyberpunk on launch was way better than it was received, and even the first reviews were positive, he concludes. Then it became a cool thing not to like it. We went from hero to zero really fast. That was the tough moment. We didn't know what was happening. We knew that the game is great. Yes, we can improve it. Yes, we need to take time to do it, and we need to rebuild some stuff. That took us a lot of time, but I don't believe we were ever broken. We were always like, let's do this. So I appreciate Platko Golubsky's positivity here. The game was pulled from the PlayStation Store, you know, and that's a pretty low bar. It's a pretty low bar. The issue wasn't just that the game was broken, although the game was broken. The game was fundamentally broken. I recently tried to replay it earlier this year, actually, and it's still broken to a certain extent. Some things are actually more broken than when the game first came out. They fixed some things, on at least for my setup. Other things broke. But for him to be like, oh yeah, it wasn't that bad, it was cool to hate on it. What planet are you on, my guy? I mean, again, he's a PR guy, he's a marketing executive. It's in his best interests to downplay that issue. But that is some weapons grade fucking copium right there, if you ask me. For them to say the game isn't so bad, I'm not entirely convinced by that. Them saying that they're working internally to improve the working conditions at CD Projekt Red, I am. It's easy to talk the talk. I would like to see if the developer can walk the walk. But that being said, that's just my 2 cents. I pre-ordered this game foolishly because I bought into the hype that Platko Golevsky and his guys helped build up. They overpromised, they underdelivered, and what they did deliver didn't work as intended. So think about that trust thermocline. They're going to have a long way to go, I think, to rebuild the goodwill that they lost. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if there's anything else you could think of that you'd like me to cover, please let me know. And if not, I will see you on the next one. Thank you very much.